On today's show, we'll be talking about something that humans have done for generations, something that can be applied in virtually any situation, and something known to do the impossible. We'll be talking with Noa Baum, a true master of this something. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. In today's episode of Unlocked, we explore the profound power of story, not just entertainment, but as a force for healing, for growth, and for human connection. My guest is internationally acclaimed storyteller, author, and coach, Noa Baum. Now, for decades, Noa has helped individuals and organizations transform experience into meaningful narrative. Stories that bridge cultural divides, inspire understanding, and foster peace. Together, we'll unpack why the spoken word carries such emotional power, how personal stories become instruments of healing, and how anyone, even those who don't see themselves as storytellers, can learn to use story to lead, to connect, and to make an impact. If you've ever wondered how to turn experience into influence or conversation into transformation, I suggest that you get comfortable and be prepared for a remarkable journey with Noa Baum. Noa, welcome to Unlocked.
Oh, thank you, Madeline. I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. The Washington Post describes you as, quote, spreading cultural truths that eclipse geopolitical boundaries, unquote. And they are right, because I've watched you do that. My first time I saw Noa perform, I knew I would never, ever forget that performance. And I haven't, Noa. It made such an impact on me, but I digress. She draws on over 40 years of professional training and experience to help individuals and teams worldwide with a variety of storytelling skills. She was born and raised in Jerusalem, and Noa presents internationally, however, from Turkey to Australia and across the U.S. And she's worked with the World Bank, the Mayo Clinic, the U.S. Defense Department, the Kennedy Center, and storytelling festivals everywhere. Noa's two award-winning books are called A Land Twice Promised, a memoir, and a picture book on the power of kindness called How the Birds Become Friends. Noa, I have to stop right now. You have to show the audience this wonderful picture book for children.
I love it.
How the Birds Became Friends. Tell us about this book.
This is an old Burmese ancient story that, stories were never intended for children. They were for everyone. And I have been telling that story, and I just adapted it to children. And the Familius, my publisher, who published my memoir, was always asking me, do you have anything else? Do you have anything else? And I said, yes, I do. And the illustrator is my dear friend Zev Labinger, who is an ornithologist and award-winning scientific illustrator. And his bird pictures and illustrations have won multiple awards all over this country and the world. So it's just
yes, show us one. Look at that.
Yes. And and it's just a lovely story about breaking patterns of aggression with kindness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Noa. I'm so happy you have that handy to show. I get excited about children's books, and I'll tell you why, because I tried to write one. I said, hey, 400, 500 words, no big deal. I can wrap that out in a half an hour. Well, several weeks later, I realized it's much more than I thought. Okay, well, I beg the audience's indulgence, but sometimes there's just something you have to see. And this was one of them. Well, the core of our conversation really will revolve around story. Usually, the first question, however, that's asked is, what is story? But you know what? No, I don't want to start there. I'm going to start by talking about the medium that's used because you can tell a story, you can read a story, you can watch a movie that has a story in it, or you could even potentially come to a place where you experience a story of your own in your own life. Uh, why don't you talk a little bit about this aspect of uh, why listening to a story is just so powerful?
Well, you're so right, Madeline. And it's one of the first things that I talk about. I teach an online class about how to take a memory from your life and transform it into a story. And it's one of the very first things that I say. We have to define, well, what am I talking about? Because so many things are called story. Commercials are called story, and a newspaper journalist article is called story, and certainly, movies and novels, and the word story is used everywhere. My great friend and storyteller Bill Harley says that is because story is a seed art.
A seed.
A seed. It's
love
it's
it.
at the core
Yeah.
of who we are as humans. It is at the core of how our brain is wired. And so many things spring from that seed that are called story. But the story that I'm interested in, the story that I swim in, the story definition that I offer when I work with people is that very basic thing that we humans do. Long, 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 long before all this media was here, long before there were books, long before anybody knew how to read and write. For, I think scientists now say, at least 250,000 years before any written word, people told stories.
Yeah.
And so what I'm interested in is really the power of that, the power of how we as humans create meaning in our human interaction through telling stories, not reading them, not using them for selling something, for commercial, or for, manipulating propaganda, really for exploring who we are, making meaning of what it means to be human.
Yeah. As you were going through that, I was thinking about how in my, I'll call it my religious tradition, they always insist upon reading from whatever the central readings is, but it's read out loud. And I always said, well, people can read it themselves and you can talk about it. And they said, no, the actual expression of the words. There's power in the expression of the words.
Yeah.
And it really changed the way, in fact, I listened to those stories written many centuries ago.
Yeah. Because here's the thing, that is the most powerful thing that distinguishes spoken word from written language. Yes. And that's why I love, I talk about spoken language. There's three main things that distinguish it. The first one is that it uses multiple forms of expression to communicate meaning. So voice carries meaning. Maya Angelou famously said, it's not the word. It takes the human voice to infuse meaning in the word. Yes. Voice carries meaning. Our eye contact, our eye behavior creates meaning. Our gestures, what we do with our hands, carry meaning. Our orientation in space carries meaning. Our rhythm, our silence, our pause, our facial expressions, and words. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in spoken language, it is all multidimensional. So I can say something I can give content, and I can use all these various expressive tools to support and enhance and emphasize. Yes, I can say, I love you. Yes, and my face and my hands and my voice, everything enhances the content, makes it
Mhm.
stronger,
Yeah.
gives it more meaning.
Yes.
But in spoken language, I can just as easily say, I love you. And the
You
words
didn't convince me.
and the words haven't changed,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
words haven't changed, but obviously the meaning has. And so this is how we get sarcasm. This is how we get humor and irony because of this multidimensionality. It happens all at once. If I had to write that to describe to you what I just
Yeah.
did, I would have needed at least, 3 paragraphs, if not 3 pages.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the third distinguisher between spoken and written language, which is it is time based. So it's in the here and the now. So if I am reading a book and I don't remember the name of the dog, what do? I go back. If I'm listening to a story and I miss the name of the dog, I'm lost if the name of the dog was important. So as a storyteller, as a speaker, I always have to remember that it is time based, so that I need to repeat something if it's important. I need to be all the time in connection with my listeners. If
Mhm.
there's a frowning up here, if they're responding in
Mhm.
nonverbal cues, I respond to it. So it's a relationship. It's a relationship. It's always a relationship. Telling a story is about communicating through oral language, creating images in the mind of the listener. So, Doug Lipman, my beloved teacher, the late Doug Lipman, has a wonderful little triangle that he uses that I use in my teachings as well. Just think about this trinity, this trinity relationship, right, between teller, listener, and story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the teller has a relationship with the story. They, if it's their own story, they know it, they explore it, they figure out the meaning, or if it's a traditional story, um, and they imagine the story, they imagine what the story is, and they communicate what they imagine to the listener
Mhm.
using spoken language, oral language, and then so that the listener can have a relationship with the story, so that the listener can imagine the story in their mind. And it's continuous. It's continuous.
Mhm.
It's not a one-way thing. It's not something I do to you.
Mhm.
It's something that we co-create. In Tanzania, they have this wonderful opening when a storyteller begins to tell a story before the community. They always start and say, "I have been and I have seen," and the community of listeners respond and say, "See, so that we may see." They don't say, "What's the moral of the story?" They don't say, "Well, what's going to happen?" See, so that we may see. Imagine, so that we can imagine with you. Take us with you into your world. Yeah. Take us with you into your world so that we can go on this journey. And for me, this is storytelling in a nutshell. This is the essence. This is just the essence of it. See so that we can see.
You know, early on, I learned, and from Doug Lipman as well,
Mm.
that you never control the story once it is spoken because it's in the mind of the listener. And he said, never worry about that because it's for them. The gift is for them.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
it,
Hannah
I,
Ardent said, uh, story communicates meaning without making the error of defining it.
Yes. Yes.
I hope I
Love that.
butcher that quote, but it's something like that. Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
And
Well,
that's it's exactly that.
well, your work is very much in the realm of healing. I
Hmm.
wonder if you talk a little bit about why do you choose to tell healing stories?
Mm. Why don't I tell you a story?
I think they'd be lovely.
These days, this is a story that I need to hear, and I tell it a lot. Um, it is told that in every generation there are times when hope threatens to leave this world. And it is said that at such dark times, Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer, known as the Holy Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name, he was a very radical healer, a mystic philosopher, teacher, and healer that transformed Judaism in the 1700s. And when such dark, dark times came, the Baal Shem Tov had a strange habit. He would go out of the town, he would go into the forest, into a secret place that only he knew, and there he would light a special fire, and he would utter a prayer, evoking the most sacred name of the divine. And the danger would be lifted. The darkness gone, hope remained alive. And it is said that his descendant, the Maggid of Mezritz, Rabbi Dov Ber, came upon difficult, dark times. And so he too went to that place in the forest. But he lifted his eyes to the heavens. He said, Ribono shel olam, master of the universe, I don't know how to light that special fire, but I can say the words of the prayer. Please let it be enough. And it was. The danger was averted and hope remained in the world. And many years later, one of his descendants, Rabbi Moshe Lev of Sassov, came to lead the people, and times were dark. And so he too went to that place in the forest, and he lifted his eyes to the heavens, and he said, Ribono shel olam, master of the universe, I don't know how to light the fire. No one remembers the words of that ancient prayer, but I found my way to this place. Please let it be enough. And it was. The danger was averted. Hope remained in the world. Many years later, Rabbi Israel of Ritzin was sitting in his study with his head in his hands, and he said, Ribono shel olam, times are so dark. And we don't know how to light that fire anymore. We do not remember the words to that ancient prayer, and we cannot even find our way to that place in the forest. But we can still tell the story. Please let it be enough. And it was. And it still is. For as long as stories are told, hope remains in our world. And I don't know about you, but I feel we're living in very dark times. And for me, keeping the stories, connecting with people through stories, listening to people's stories, you encountering the depth and beauty of our humanity keeps me alive. And keeps hope for me.
Well, there is no question that you touched me in that telling. I loved the fact that none of the outward signs were necessary. It was,
What do you mean by that?
well, it didn't need a fire, it didn't need a prayer, it didn't need a place. It just needed the remembrance of the story.
Yeah.
which gives me great hope because it says it's not externalities, Madelyn.
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah.
well, I can see why you work in healing then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suggest it's not on our schedule to ask you, but I would like you to tell people a little bit about the healing work and the healing story. And I know you can't tell that story because it's too long, but the story that I watched you perform that first night, and I know you remember that too. Talk a little bit about that so that people can understand the real depth of what you bring.
Okay. Well, there's a TEDx talk about it, so they
Oh,
can
good. Well,
always go and
we'll
look
put
at
that link in the show notes.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, so that is the story that I wrote my memoir about, how I came to create that story. So I came to this country in 1990 from Israel, and on the playground, we lived in student housing in Davis, California, and I met a woman who I recognized her beauty from home. And so I walked up to her and I said, she was holding her baby boy. I was with my little baby boy. And I said, what's his name? She said, Tamer, and yours? And I said, Itai. Where are you from? Jerusalem. And I said, oh. And she said, oh, well, near Ramallah, actually. And I said, well, I'm from Jerusalem too. And her American husband steps in and said, my wife is a Palestinian. And of course I knew. I didn't know if she'd want to talk to me. And later I found out that she felt the same. She didn't know if I'd want to talk to her. But over the years, we became friends, mom friends. I think we established very quickly on, that I'm not a great supporter of my government in Israel, not even back then in 1993 when we met. But we never talked about things back home. We talked about mom stuff. And I think both of us never put it in words, but each of us knew that back home, this would have been much more complicated. That my son would grow up to go to the army and check IDs at roadblocks. Her son would grow up to arrive at the checkpoint, throw stones at the oppressor. But we kept our relationship. And then in 2000, I attended my very first National Storytelling Network conference. I presented a workshop there, and I took a workshop with Lauren Nemi and Elizabeth Ellis, two very prominent masters of story.
Lauren has been on Unlocked.
Yes, yes, of course. He's one of my mentors. And it was a workshop about the importance of telling difficult stories.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting through that workshop and then, on the flight back home and thinking, there's no way I can do this. I can't do this. I only tell folk tales. I always tell stories with a happy ending, and I can't tell personal stories. I couldn't imagine how anyone in the world would ever, how to bring people into the complex reality that I come from, how to translate that to Americans. I just couldn't imagine how to begin even. And how do you even begin to describe my completely insane mother? It's like there's just no way to tell my personal stories. But, there's always that little in Hebrew we say kol dmama daka, the thin sound of silence. There's that little thin silence in you that screams. And I knew that if I want to grow as an artist, I will have to go out of my comfort zone. Yeah. And I will have to go into. And so I recruited Lauren to be my mentor. And I started working on this memory. It wasn't a story yet. It was a memory of my third grade experience of the 1967 Six-Day War in Jerusalem. And And he said, that's an important story for Americans to hear. And I thought, but it's not a story, it's just, what happened. A story has to go somewhere. It's not, there's nothing that happened. We were in the bomb shelters, the bombs fell with all the neighbors. It's like, what's the story? And then I thought, oh, but I know this woman. We've known each other for 7 years now. And she grew up in Jerusalem, not very far from where I grew up. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, I never heard what that war was like for her.
Yeah.
Did she sleep with all the neighbors in the furnace room? Did Palestinians even have bomb shelters? And I was so embarrassed to realize that I never even thought about these things. And I called her up, and a new chapter in our relationship began. I mean, at first my idea was that we'll do a show together. I'll tell my memories of 67, she'll tell hers, but she's an engineer, and she does not stand up and talk in front of people. She made that very clear, but she agreed to tell me, she agreed to meet, and we started talking. We started talking and started asking questions and listening, and the stories came out. And she always told me later that if it hadn't been for the trust built between us for those 7 years, she would have never shared those stories.
Yeah.
But the second day after we talked, I realized this is really powerful, because I was sitting there and I'm listening to someone talking about them, and the them are my people.
Mm.
And it's hard, and it's painful. But I'm listening to her because she's telling me her story. She told me how when she was 10, she saw Israel, a 13-year-old boy being beaten by Israeli soldiers. And that was the first time in her life she understood the meaning of the word hate. And I'll never forget that. It felt like somebody just kicked me in the stomach. These them, right, are our boys, our symbol of security, everyone that I know that turns 18 and goes to the army. My people are them. And but because she was telling me her story, and I was the one who asked, and I was the one asking questions, I had to hold that. And it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary because I felt like that compassion, I was not listening to the story of a Palestinian. I was listening to the story of my friend. I was listening to my friend. And I went home and I'm like, I don't have the energy with 2 little kids to go to demonstrations, but I can do something with my art. And I have to do something where I can create something that will evoke that compassion in other people, so that we can start listening to each other. And so, with the help of Lauren, and the book talks a lot about all that, about how I came to that and my childhood in Jerusalem and everything. And also the process of, then taking conversations that we had, recording them, and transforming this oral, spoken history into a performance piece that was called A Land Twice Promised. And the interesting part of it, so it's like 4 monologues. So it's my story, her mother's story, and my mother's story. And the most interesting thing about this is that people always come to me after the show, and they're so impressed with, that I do the different voices and how I could tell the stories of my enemy, right? How I'm able to put myself in the shoes of the other. But the most interesting thing for me was what happened in my relationship with my mother. And which, if you will allow me, I will talk a little bit about that, because it's, there's the transformative power of listening and to her story, and then telling their story, and then there's telling my mother's story. stories that I grew up all my life that I hated. Her brother was killed in 1948 when he was 22 years old, and he was like the closest person in the world to her, and that loss colored my entire life, our whole family's life.
Mm.
And so as a child, you hear those stories about this mythical hero again and again and again, and then as a teenager you start hating them. I couldn't stand it, and I had a very, very difficult, volatile, really difficult relationship with my mother. She was a very, very complex and difficult person. But in order to do this show, I realized that her story belongs there too. And so I had to start asking questions and interviewing her and listening to the stories that I thought I knew and trying to get her to tell me more. Now, I don't know if you've ever worked with somebody who's been traumatized, but one of the ways that people who've been traumatized deal with it is that they eventually have a set way to tell the story.
They protect themselves.
Yes. And the way to tell the story becomes almost calcified.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every time I try to ask a question that will divert from that version, she would get very upset with me. So, for example, she tells the story of how she was inside the walls of the old city during the war as a 19-year-old, and there was a Jordanian legionnaire. It was right after the surrender of the old city, who was sent, and he was helping her bring the wounded to the Jordanian doctors to decide who goes into captivity and who is set free. And she tells that story, and in her way. And then I try this up, and I say, well, and did you think about Yaakov, her brother, who was at the time the British put him in jail, and then he was killed. And she flares up. Who had time to think? They were bombing us night and day. What kind of questions do you have? And she goes back to. It was another time I asked her, so do you remember, like, at the moment that the Declaration of Independence came through the radio, do you remember what you were thinking? Did you miss Yaakov? Questions like that.
Yeah.
Who had time to think? You're asking me all these questions. Who remembers these things? And she gets really upset with me. She bangs the phone. And I'm used to that. She would always do that. And 5 minutes later, she calls me back. I missed him all the time. And all of a sudden, I started realizing that set way, that voice, that set way of telling the story that I became allergic to was her shield.
Yeah.
And when I tell the story, I can't tell it like that because I will not evoke compassion. Mm. And so I had to tell it from that place that she hides.
Oh.
And that was experiencing compassion for my mother was huge. And the first time she saw it was in 2003. I was just beginning, doing a few performances with audiences, getting feedback. And they came to visit here. And I couldn't look at her where she and my father were sitting throughout the show. It was terrifying for me. And after the show, they were here for about 3 more days before they went on to New York. And I felt something was different. Now, of course, she said, the title is wrong because it wasn't promised twice. It was only promised to Abraham and to the Jews. But, she liked it. But something changed in between us. And I couldn't put my finger in it. And I called my wise and wonderful friend, Gail Rosen. And I said, I don't know what's going on with my mom. And she says, Noa, she felt heard.
Yes. Yes.
And it was like, ding, ding. And all of a sudden I realized that so much of the combativeness between us, that volatility with her, is part of that anxiety that I don't understand her, and that by telling the story in the way that I told it,
Yeah.
Set aside her narcissistic need to
Yeah.
be, that she was a narcissist, but that was amazing. That was a big transformation, and something shifted in our relationship. Now, it wasn't huge, and it's not like she didn't drive me crazy afterwards, but something shifted. And for me, it was this world opened up.
Yeah.
I liked stories. I loved stories. They made me feel good. I never experienced that with story in my life. I experienced listening to amazing storytellers, and it really touched me very deeply and made me think about things and want to be a better person and
Mhm.
things like that. But what happened for me there was huge. And from there, I discovered, we need validation. We so desperately need validation as
Yes.
humans. And we are so mean and stingy to each other. We're not giving it enough, and we can do better.
Yeah. I've never heard that part of the story. And I thank you so much for that, because that's one of the most difficult areas to explore and look at the depth of the healing that occurred. And not just for you, but for her as well. That's the beauty of of telling the story.
Yeah, I,
Ah,
I wrote about it in my book. There's a whole chapter about this in much
uh-huh.
detail about. I mean, the whole there's many threads in the book. There's
Of
this
course,
thread
of
of my
course.
relationship with my Palestinian friend, and there's this thread of creating the one woman show, and then there's the thread of coming from the very black and white narrative of my childhood to be able to stand on stage and tell the story of a Palestinian,
Yeah,
and and then there's the thread of my relationship with my mother. So they're all in there.
marvelous.
Yeah.
Well, now this is a most intimate kind of relationship, but I know that you work with people all over the world.
Mm.
So talk a little bit about how you work, how do you facilitate? And you use the word growing stories, which I loved. Oh my goodness. Because I know of the many stories that I tell. You're right. You have to grow them. So talk about that and how you work with people and what you have seen the impact. Because I know in my work, the impact that I can have on a team with just using some simple stories
Yes.
is remarkable. So
Yes.
and I know you do it even to
Yes.
greater depths.
Yes. So, I do different things. So there's the one-on-one coaching that I do. And then it depends very much on what is being brought to me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's somebody that wants help with a TEDx talk, or somebody that wants help with a lecture, or somebody who's a professional storyteller who wants to tell their story or explore personal stories. Um, and and there it's really a question of just listening and trying to understand what they want, what they're trying to achieve, and then trying to help them understand story and how it works, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of times our tendency is to talk in conclusions and generalizations and concepts, and or to give a resume, to give a list of everything that happened. Yes. And so then we call it story. But like the example that I gave from the opening in Tanzania, a story has impact when it reaches our imagination, when it touches our heart. And so, in order to reach the imagination, we need to use images. We need to use something to stimulate the imagination. And sometimes it could be um, a whole scene that we show in a story, or it could be just a little example that we bring to life, with with images, with sensory centered language, or in the way that we infuse it with meaning in our telling. Yes.
It-
uh, that's what I do, on one-on-one. And then there's things that I do with teams and with groups, which again, there's skill building, and then there is community building and team building.
Talk about the community and team building.
So the basic principle of community building and team building is really the listening. It's very much, you and I once, I remember, we did something for the appreciative listening, right? Appreciative inquiry, right?
Yes.
And centered on this, because of what I've just talked about, the desperate, mostly unconscious, deep need for validation that we have as human beings. And so I always feel like I'm not really doing anything, but what I am doing is I'm creating a safe container.
Yes.
And I'm giving a very, very specific and contained structure. So it's, just tell me about yourself, and you can let people just chat forever. So it's not that. It's rather strict. Well, you have 2 minutes to do da da da, and you have 1 minute da 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 da, and it's so, and I move you through a process. So a lot of times, like if I'm doing like a half day or a 3-hour workshop and people think they can just pop in and out, I can't allow it.
No.
Because it's an organic process. So it's the image of the garden. It's again an image that Doug Lippman introduced, which I love. It's not a mechanical thing.
No.
And you don't, you first plant a seed and you water it, and the sun has to come out, and it starts to grow, and it doesn't grow into a full flower. It starts with a little green shoot, and then there's leaves, and then there's a little bud, and then the bud opens. So, it's organic. It's organic. So you can't just come in the middle and want there to be a flower. So I work with multiple listenings. I work in creating structures where people are exposed to multiple listeners. And I do it online too, in my online classes. Actually, one of my classes just finished last night. And some of the things that people said, I loved it. I mean, the only thing I don't like about it is that when it's in person, I get to move around and eavesdrop, and I get to hear a little more of people's stories. When it's online, they go into breakout rooms. I pop in and out just to make sure everything is okay, but I don't really get to listen to a whole story. But it was extraordinary. And one of the things that people say again and again and again is what a powerful experience it was to be exposed to so many different listeners that all give you support and ask you questions and listen, really listen, like a friend, with compassion, with not with judgment, and not with the intent of fixing you or telling you how to do it better. And just that, slowly, the story keeps changing and changing and changing and growing, and growing in meaning, and growing in layers, and growing in skill. And I mean, I love that process. Because
I think you do.
Well, because it's rewarding to see somebody start like this, and then end in this open-hearted, excited, energized, life-filled presence.
Well, I can see that you bring healing just through those kinds of processes, no question. I want to ask you another question, because I know my audience. Let's say you're 40 something. You've never told a story in your life. I mean, well, you and I know that you've told a story because when you were 5, you could tell a story, but they don't feel they have that capacity. I know you've talked about how you work with people individually, but can you give us some hints as to how we can begin? If we really have never done it, don't feel comfortable, something that they can take away and try.
Mhm. I told you that that's a hard one for me because I'm one of those people who don't believe in the 3 steps to the perfect story, and here's your manual for the 7 steps to a perfect life. However, I would say there's 2 main things that you can always do. And yes, we all have stories. But to make a story not just about me, to make a story about us, which is the stories that have impact, you do need to work on it. But the 2 most important things, the one that I already talked about is remember, see so that we can see.
Yes.
So take us into your world by offering us images, by offering us examples, by offering us your personal experience, your vulnerability. That's probably the hardest thing. But the most distinguishing factor, which I didn't mention at the beginning, between the written word and spoken language is your presence. So your emotional and physical presence with the other, be it one-on-one, be it a team, be it an audience of thousands. Your presence is maybe 90% of the meaning. Radical. Meaning that bringing who you are, bringing yourself, bringing something real about you, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, not just bringing yourself as the hero, but allowing yourself to be the fool that learned something.
Yeah.
That's the work. But that's, to me, the core of the magic. And when you have that presence, and you allow yourself to trust, because we all have it. It's just allowing ourselves to trust that who I am is part of the message. And the most important thing to remember is that communication is about connection. It's not, did I get all the words right? It's, are you with me? Are you with me? Can you see what I see? Are you with me?
Beautiful.
So
I wrote a couple of things down. It really struck me. What you're talking about when you're giving these, I'll call them tips, even though they're not 1, 2, 3.
right. They're not in that order.
That's right. That's right. Because they both work on your inside,
Yes.
on you, not on the delivery. It's all working within here. And that is, if nothing else, I take from this conversation, Noa, the fact that StoryWorks allows a leader to work on themselves to become more present to their staff.
A story has impact because it's fueled by your passion.
Of course.
And if you are just there behind the words and you think the words are going to do it for you,
No.
that's never going to connect with anyone.
Yeah.
And even if you have a presentation that has a lot of data and has a lot of scientific stuff that you have to go through, and I work with scientists a lot. My late husband was a scientist, so I know that territory. It is a difficult territory.
Yes.
But when they discover that, oh, even if I just start with something a little different, I'm already opening the heart of the listener. I'm already creating enough trust. Then I can go into the data, how effective that is.
But I tell you, Noah, what I see is happening even before then, because as they work within themselves, they bring a different person to the encounter. And I call it an encounter, whatever the interaction.
Mhm.
They become more present because they are more present to themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, this is so powerful. But I'm looking at the clock, and I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell another story.
Okay.
Could you do that?
Of course. You need not ask twice. I want to tell another story that I love dearly and that I use a lot. It's from the Middle East. Um, there are wise fools in every single culture on this planet. And one of my favorite wise fools is Nasrudin Hoja. And he has many names. In the East, he's called Nasrudin. In Turkey, he's called Nasrudin Hoja. Sometimes he's called Joha. But this is a Sufi version of one of the famous stories about Nasrudin. So the great Nasrudin Hoja was once asked, "Why are we here?" And he said, that's a very complicated question. Let me tell you a story. A man was walking once, late at night, on the outskirts of the village. And it was very, very dark and very late when suddenly he saw a group of men coming towards him. And he thought, oh, who could be out at this time of night? Robbers. Murderers! Heaven forbid! He looked to the left, he looked to the right. There was nowhere to go but the cemetery wall. He clambered up to the top of the wall, jumped on the other side. There was an open grave. He jumped into the open grave and he lay there trembling, hoping that they just won't notice and keep going. Meanwhile, the men coming up the road noticed up ahead a man stopping in the middle of the road, looking to the left, looking to the right, climbing up the cemetery wall and disappearing. That's strange. So they followed. And they too climbed the cemetery wall, jumped on the other side, and lo and behold, on the other side, they see in an open grave none other than their next door neighbor. They said, "Neighbor, what are you doing in the cemetery in the middle of the night in an open grave?" He looked up. He recognized his next door neighbors. He said, just because you ask a question doesn't always mean there's an answer. But let me put it this way. I'm here because of you. You are here because of me. And that, said Nasrudin Hoja, is why we're here. I'm here because of you. You're here because of me.
No, that was such a perfect ending. Thank you. As you're telling this story, I'm thinking, how does it end? How does it end?
It's the essence of storytelling for me. It won't happen without a listener. So I can't do anything without you. You can't, I'm here because of you. You're here because of me. And then it's also, our existential way of why we're here.
That's exactly right. And what a marvelous thought in these times. Yes. To remind ourselves why we are here, really and truly. Noa Baum, I cannot thank you enough for joining me.
Thank you so much. It was so fun to talk with you. And yeah, it was really great, Madelyn. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, you probably have noticed that we're not having a grounds for thought because I wanted to give Noa time to tell a final story. And I am so glad that I did. I always ask you, if you got anything from today's session, and thank you for being here. It's This was a different way of using our stories and understanding story, but I think probably you now have a better sense of what it really means. And of course, if you're on YouTube, click the like button and subscribe. You know the drill, and it's really important. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.